If you've spent any time in the vintage audio world, you know the name Fisher. For a generation of audiophiles in the 50s and 60s, a piece of stereo equipment bearing the name The Fisher wasn't just a component, it was a statement. They were arguably the best of the best. But how did a company once considered the pinnacle of American hi-fi, founded by the legendary Avery Fisher, end up as a basement-level store brand? This is the story of the dramatic rise and fall from the concert hall to the clearance aisle and the receivers that marked the turning points along the way. I've also got a funny story about Fisher that almost ended a lifelong friendship. Let's look at the brand Fisher and how it was once the most prestigious brand in audio and how it became a brand you didn't want anybody to know you owned. It's really sad. Let's get into it. Let's talk about it. Here we go. This video is brought to you by skylabsaudio.com. Head over after the video, grab yourself a new Team Loudness shirt. That way you can let everybody know you're not scared to push a button. And if you're new to the Fisher story, the Fisher brand, especially from the tube era, one of the most shocking things I think you'll find is back then, this was arguably the brand, arguably the benchmark for hi-fi craftsmanship in the 50s and 60s. That's how regarded this brand was. That's how good it was. Really all because of Avery Fisher's level of detail he put into each one of these pieces. Specifically, their integrated receivers like the Fisher 400, 500, and 800. They also made several integrated tube amplifiers like the 101X, the 100B, and Avery Fisher was not without competition. Brands like Macintosh, Harman Kardon, Marantz, H. Scott. Macintosh had their massive tube amplifiers. Marantz had the legendary Model 7 preamp. And to a lot of people, Fisher did it better than all of them. It was that good. I know, it sounds shocking. Some of the key pieces you might want to keep your eye out for if you want to grab some early Fisher, definitely check out the 800B. This is an early 60s monster receiver packed with 22 tubes. You've got the powerful 7591 output tubes that deliver 30 watts per channel. That is a lot for a tube amplifier. And for the AM/FM people out there, it doesn't get any better. Broadcast radio was definitely the dominant format at the time. Avery Fisher knew this, and he made sure his tuners were the benchmark. And don't forget the tube tuning eye. When you tell somebody you're looking at the top down of a tube, and that green eye is helping you tune in your radio station. Our grandparents were incredible engineers. The stuff they came up with, what little they had, is unbelievable. And then later with the Fisher 400 using the 7868 output tubes, this was Fisher's way of lowering the price, allowing more people to buy their product. And over the years, being inside of several of these pieces myself, they didn't skimp on the 400 either. I think both of these receivers are criminally underpriced right now, and I think the integrated amplifiers are even more undervalued. I am shocked that for $600 to $800 you can pick up a Fisher X101 or a 100B, and we'll talk about that a little bit more later. With all this, it's so crazy to think at one point Fisher could be sold next to a cheap blender in a department store, but that's where it's headed. With the popularity of solid-state receivers really taking over, while Macintosh and Marantz almost shifted into solid-state seamlessly, H. Scott and Fisher really struggled. And while it wasn't just solid-state technology that Fisher struggled with, in 1969, Avery Fisher had enough, he wanted out, and he sold the company to Emerson. And why the quality didn't drop off overnight, this is where it really starts going downhill. Oddly enough, the most valuable, the most coveted piece of Fisher equipment, it's actually a solid-state receiver, the 800T. It's definitely ironic that a brand of this stature, known for tube amplification, has a solid-state receiver that is the most valuable piece, and almost the rest of it is worthless. Now, I've never had a Fisher 800T. I think we had a smaller unit from this era, but they're rare. You don't see them very often. I think the reason they're so valuable is because of an innovative technology they put into the 800T where you could preset your stations. And this was just way ahead of its time. You didn't see stuff like this really until the 80s when digital tuners came into play. So for somebody wanting the best of the best, the ability to just push a button and go to a radio station, I'm sure was absolutely mind-blowing. And just looking at the price of what the 800T is selling for, I imagine a lot of you out there, and myself included, have possibly walked by one of these units in a garage sale, tag sale, a thrift store, and thought, it's a solid state Fisher. And that was a mistake. And so while a big corporation like Emerson really did a good job of maintaining Fisher's quality, in 1975, they sold the company again. And this time it went to the Japanese manufacturer, Sanyo. And this is where you really see the Fisher brand name and the build quality take an absolute brutal beating. I mean, Sanyo's goal was loud and clear here. We are going to take this Fisher brand name and we're going to leverage the hell out of it. It's really no different with other brands like Crosley, Jensen, Westinghouse. For a lot of you out there, you might not know that those were actually really prestigious names back in the day. And because that name had value, it had trust to the customers, a new big corporation can just come in, buy the name, and then just start slapping it on cheap products. And consumers out in the store will go, oh, I know Crosley. I remember that brand. They were good. It's got to be a good product. But like everything else, the warning was staring them right in the eye with the price point. You get what you pay for most of the time. And this is also where I almost lost a lifelong friendship. I had a buddy from high school bring me his dad's vintage Fisher receiver. I think it was a 202. It was dirty. You could tell there were 40 years of fingerprints, peanut butter, Cheeto dust all over that faceplate. And I was just going to go through it for him, get it cleaned up, get all the static out of the pots, look around on the inside for anything glaring, and clean it up for him. And like I always do, I grab my microfiber cloth with my 409 or my Simply Green cleaner, sprayed the cloth down, wiped down the front of the faceplate, and all the lettering just came right off with it. I am definitely not the only one that's done this, because when you see this era Fisher posted on eBay, they're all missing lettering. If you really wanted to, you could probably get in there with some Q-tips, get that peanut butter off in between the numbers. If it were me, I think you're stuck with it. You're stuck with the finger gunk, the cigarette smoke, and the paps. A lot of people will say, I've got a Sanyo and it sounds incredible. And I would absolutely agree with you. You know, even with new products today, when you're looking at two different price points of an amplifier or a receiver, I don't think there's that dramatic jump in audio quality. Being they're the same age, same topology, that type of thing. For me, I think the big price jump comes down to fit and finish. And I know that's silly. I know a lot of people don't think that's relevant, and that's fine too. For you, Sanyo is perfect. You can get a Sharpie and redraw all those numbers around your volume pot. If it's just the sound you're after, they're great. They sound great. There's nothing wrong with them. They were just cheaply made. They cut a lot of corners. And everybody knows it, including Sanyo. And so while the mid to late 70s were not a good time for Fisher, it still gets worse. Because in the 80s, they had beat that name up so bad that it became a store brand for Sears. Sears sold tools, blenders, and jeans, not audiophile equipment. And even though looking at the 80s Fisher by Sears equipment, you might be thinking that is just pure garbage. And I would say the same thing if my parents in the late 80s didn't buy a massive Fisher stereo system, an all-in-one, the big rack with these massive 12-inch white woofers. It had a CD player, turntable, AM/FM tuner, integrated amplifier, double cassette deck, and a remote. And we were high on the hog with that thing. I remember when they brought it home, it was one of the best days of my life, because as soon as everybody left the house, I was punishing those speakers. I was punishing that amplifier. And the craziest part about that Fisher stereo system is I never blew the woofers. I never blew the tweeters. That amplifier never went in for repair. And my older sister just sold that stereo system in a garage sale in the mid 2000s. For me, at the time, it sounded great. In my memory, knowing what I know now, it wasn't the best sounding system in the world. Those speakers were not that great. And as nostalgic as I am about stereo equipment, I have no desire to own that system again. It's perfectly fine where it is in my memory. So yes, while a lot of the pieces of equipment from Fisher in the 80s were not that great, we got our value out of it. That stereo didn't owe us a dime. And definitely to give credit to that stereo system, a lot of times in the late 80s, early 90s, you would see what looked like all separates in one of those cabinets. And then you'd pull it out and you'd look at the side and it's one box with one power cord. At least that Fisher stereo standard my parents picked up, they were individual components. It got the job done. And I really doubt that stereo is serviceable today. It's got to be full of integrated circuits that are just unobtainable. There's not enough value to warrant a technician going through it. Some things we buy just aren't meant to be repaired, unfortunately. I had some great times with that stereo system though. So did my friends. I know in the last year with Bose buying Macintosh, everybody is just on high alert. The Macintosh fans are scared to death about what's going to happen to their beloved brand. I mean, most of these brands that are over 15 years old have traded hands more times than a dollar bill. But I do think the story of Fisher is the extreme. You've got a brand that was so prestigious. It was built so well, such a statement piece. To go from that to where Fisher ended up in the 90s, really, unless Macintosh totally takes a nosedive and becomes a Best Buy brand like Insignia, I don't think anybody's ever going to top that story of Fisher. I'm telling you, if you're looking for a tube amplifier or something different, grab a tube era Fisher. Technicians actually like working on them. They're not as complex as solid state. You'd be surprised how little you might pay for a full restoration as opposed to a solid state piece from the 70s, and you might really enjoy it. Appreciate you watching another video. Definitely share your stories in the comments. I know there's a ton of them out there that followed this brand from the height of hi-fi to the bottom of the Sears blue light special. And if you like this video, you should definitely watch that one. It's fun, I promise.